You probably feel confident about Japanese cuisine. You've tasted it, ordered it plenty of times, maybe even explained dishes to friends over dinner. But everything you're about to learn will show that you never really understood what you were eating. 1. You've been confidently calling raw fish sushi your entire life, and every sushi chef within earshot has quietly died a little inside. The word sushi has never, not once in its entire history, referred to raw fish. The word refers exclusively to the vinegared rice. That's the whole definition. The raw fish component has its own name, sashimi, and it exists as a completely independent dish that requires no rice whatsoever and therefore has nothing to do with sushi by definition. The earliest form of sushi, called narazushi, involved fish fermented in rice for months. Nobody ate the rice. The rice was the preservation medium and was thrown away when the meal was served. The thing you were actually calling sushi this whole time was literally the part people historically discarded. Many sushi varieties contain zero raw fish at all. Tamago is sweetened egg omelet, kappamaki is cucumber, inari is seasoned fried tofu, and an entire category of vegetable rolls exists that has never been within 10 feet of raw seafood. A California roll is technically sushi. A plain slice of raw tuna with no rice is technically not sushi, it's sashimi. The thing you confidently call sushi is often sashimi. The thing you dismiss as not authentic often qualifies perfectly. You've spent years calling the bread the sandwich while pointing at the turkey and wondering why nobody corrects you. 2. You consider yourself a wasabi person. You have opinions about wasabi heat. You've assessed it, compared it, discussed it at dinner with the confidence of someone who has formed a genuine educated view. None of that matters because you have almost certainly never eaten real wasabi in your life. The vast majority of wasabi served outside Japan and a significant portion of what's served inside Japan is a mixture of horseradish, mustard powder, and green food dye. It is a theatrical costume wearing a wasabi name tag and charging wasabi prices. Real wasabi, Wasabia japonica, is one of the most difficult crops on earth to cultivate. It requires cold, clean, continuously flowing mountain stream water, specific shade conditions, and between 18 months and 3 years to reach harvestable maturity. That supply constraint makes it extraordinarily expensive, between $75 and $250 per kilogram wholesale. The plastic tube at your grocery store costs approximately nothing by comparison. Real wasabi is grated fresh from the rhizome immediately before serving using a shark skin grater because its volatile compounds begin degrading within 15 minutes of preparation. The paste in a tube is chemically inert nostalgia. The heat profile is entirely different. Real wasabi produces a clean, sharp, quickly fading nasal sensation, while the horseradish paste produces a harsher, longer-lasting burn. Even in Japan, surveys suggest over 95% of sushi restaurants use the fake blend due to cost. You've been rating wine for years, and every bottle was grape-flavored sparkling water. Your opinions are about nothing. 3. You grab the soy sauce, you pour it on things. You think of it as Japan's version of table salt in liquid form. Dark, salty, a condiment. That is the entire story you've been telling yourself, and it accounts for roughly 4% of what soy sauce actually is. Soy sauce is a fermented product with a chemical complexity that rivals wine, and treating it as salt water is like treating aged balsamic vinegar as slightly fancy vinegar. Traditional soy sauce, called shoyu, is produced through a fermentation process lasting anywhere from 6 months to 3 years, involving soybeans, wheat, salt, water, and the mold Aspergillus oryzae, known as koji. The resulting liquid contains hundreds of distinct flavor compounds. There are 5 major categories of Japanese soy sauce with dramatically different profiles. Koikuchi is the dark standard type, Usukuchi is lighter colored but often saltier, Tamari is wheat-free and richer, Shiro is white and delicate, and Saishikomi is twice brewed with an intensely deep flavor. Each is calibrated for different applications. Soy sauce also contains significant glutamate, the compound responsible for umami, which is why it amplifies savory flavors rather than simply adding salt. Mass-produced chemical soy sauce shortcuts fermentation entirely by hydrolyzing soybeans with hydrochloric acid, a process taking days instead of years. It is legally classified as soy sauce. It is not the same product. Pouring it over white rice is considered unsophisticated in Japan. You have been using a Stradivarius as a doorstop and complaining it doesn't hold the door as well as a brick. 4. MSG has a reputation as a shadowy chemical agent hiding in Asian food, responsible for headaches, heart palpitations, and general suspicious foreign food danger. People proudly avoid it. Restaurants advertise its absence like a health achievement. The panic is medically debunked pseudoscience constructed entirely on top of one discredited letter written by a single man in 1968. MSG, monosodium glutamate, was isolated in 1908 by Tokyo Imperial University professor Kikunai Ikeda from kombu seaweed. He identified it as the source of the savory taste he named umami, the fifth basic taste. Glutamate, the amino acid at MSG's core, exists naturally in Parmesan cheese at roughly 1,200 milligrams per 100 grams, in tomatoes, mushrooms, soy sauce, and in human breast milk. Your body produces glutamate internally and cannot biologically distinguish between natural and synthetic sources. The original Chinese restaurant syndrome was a 1968 letter published in the New England Journal of Medicine by Dr. Robert Ho Man Kwok, describing his personal symptoms after eating. It was anecdotal, had no control group, tested nothing, and sparked a global panic regardless. Decades of double-blind controlled studies have consistently failed to establish MSG as the cause of symptoms when subjects don't know they've consumed it. The nocebo effect, feeling sick because you expect to, accounts for most reported reactions. The FDA classifies MSG as generally recognized as safe. Major health organizations worldwide share this classification. You've been afraid of a compound your own body manufactures because one man wrote a letter complaining about his dinner. He wasn't running an experiment, he was just complaining. 5. Nothing feels more authentically Japanese than a bowl of ramen. You picture centuries of grandmothers perfecting broths passed down through dynasties. It is Japan. It is ancient. It is heritage in a bowl. Ramen is approximately 100 years old, has significant Chinese origins, and became a national staple largely because of American foreign policy decisions following World War II. It is not ancient Japanese heritage. It is a 20th century survival food that got extremely good extremely fast. Ramen descended from Chinese wheat noodle soup dishes called ramen, brought to Japan by Chinese immigrants. Early versions were called Shina soba, Chinese noodles, a name used until post-war political sensitivity prompted rebranding. The dish's explosive nationwide spread was directly linked to American occupation food policy after 1945. The United States flooded Japan with cheap wheat to address severe food shortages, making wheat noodles suddenly affordable in a country traditionally reliant on rice. Instant ramen, now a global phenomenon, was invented in 1958 by Momofuku Ando of Nissin Foods. This is not ancient. This is 3 years after Disneyland opened. Regional ramen styles, Sapporo miso, Hakata tonkotsu, Tokyo shoyu, developed and differentiated primarily during the second half of the 20th century. Ramen was considered cheap, working-class street food for most of its existence. The gourmet ramen elevation is largely a phenomenon from the 1980s and 90s onward. You've been treating the microwave dinner as a family heirloom recipe because someone put it in impressive packaging and told you it had history. 6. Japanese food is synonymous with health, longevity, and a lean physique. You feel virtuous eating it. You assume anything on a Japanese menu is categorically better for you than your alternatives. Japan has the longest lifespan. Case closed, you think. Japan also has some of the highest rates of stomach cancer and sodium intake in the developed world. Japanese cuisine as a category includes deep-fried everything, sugar-heavy confections, and salt concentrations that would make a cardiologist's eye twitch before they even got to the main dish. Japan consistently ranks among the world's highest nations for sodium consumption, largely attributed to heavy daily use of soy sauce, miso, pickled vegetables, and seasoned broths. Japan has one of the highest rates of stomach cancer globally, strongly correlated in research with high salt intake and H. pylori infection rates, both connected to traditional dietary patterns. Tempura is deep frying. Tonkatsu is breaded, deep fried pork. Karaage is deep fried chicken. Agedashi tofu is deep fried tofu. Japan has an extensive, enthusiastic deep frying culture that the Japanese food is healthy narrative conveniently edits out of every conversation. Japan's convenience store and fast food culture involves heavily processed, high-calorie, high-sodium products eaten by millions of people every single day. Japanese longevity statistics are influenced by multiple factors including genetics, social structure, healthcare access, and activity levels, not solely attributable to diet. You've been crediting one player for the entire championship result and ignoring the other 10 people on the field. 7. You refer to sake as rice wine. You've said the words rice wine out loud at restaurants while feeling informed. The menu probably said rice wine too. Everyone nodded. Everyone was working from the same incomplete file. Sake is not wine. The word wine attached to sake is a regulatory and marketing convenience, not a production description, and once you understand what sake actually is, you'll realize the word wine does more harm than good. Wine is made by fermenting the natural sugars found in fruit. Sake is made from starch, rice, that must first be converted into sugar before fermentation can even begin. That process is exactly how beer is made. But sake's production goes further than beer, involving a simultaneous double fermentation called hymo-fermentation, where the conversion of starch to sugar and the fermentation of sugar to alcohol happen at the same time in the same vessel. This parallel process is technically unique among the world's major alcoholic beverages. The koji mold, Aspergillus oryzae, drives this conversion and has no real parallel in Western brewing or winemaking traditions. Premium sake grades are defined by rice polishing ratios. Junmai Daiginjo requires the rice to be polished down to at least 50% of its original size before use, producing more delicate and complex flavors. Sake's alcohol content typically runs 15 to 16%, higher than wine, significantly higher than beer. The word wine doesn't fit the chemistry, the process, or the product. You've been calling a bicycle a slow car because they both have wheels and get you somewhere. 8. You receive your sushi, you take the wasabi. You smear it into the soy sauce, swirl until everything dissolves into a dark, spicy lake, and dunk every piece of sushi into it with the confidence of someone who learned this ritual from watching other people do it at airport food courts. This is one of the most reliably cringe-inducing things a person can do at a quality sushi restaurant. And the chef behind the counter is watching you with the expression of someone witnessing a small preventable disaster unfold in slow motion. The wasabi at a proper sushi establishment is placed directly on the fish by the chef, either between the fish and rice or atop the piece, in a quantity calibrated specifically for that fish's flavor profile. Mixing wasabi into soy sauce creates a chemically unstable suspension where the volatile compounds in real wasabi degrade faster in liquid, and the resulting mixture becomes simultaneously too pungent in some bites and entirely absent in others. The soy sauce at quality sushi restaurants is itself calibrated. Some use different soy sauces for different fish. Dumping a wasabi soy slurry on everything destroys intentional pairings the chef built into the experience. Many sushi chefs consider excessive soy sauce dipping, especially rice side-down soaking, a technical error. The rice absorbs liquid, falls apart, and the flavor balance between fish and vinegared rice collapses. At omakase establishments in Japan, asking for extra soy sauce implicitly criticizes the chef's seasoning decisions. You've been adding your own sauce to a dish that was already finished, wondering why the chef looks like they're watching something die. 9. A standard bowl of miso soup arrives before your Japanese meal. It's warm, simple, a few cubes of tofu floating in delicate broth. You consider it essentially flavored water. a wellness ritual, something so light it barely counts as consumption before the real food arrives. A standard bowl of miso soup can contain between 600 and 900 milligrams of sodium, which is roughly 40% of the recommended daily limit, and you're drinking it before your actual meal even appears on the table. Miso paste is an extremely high sodium product by any measure. White miso contains approximately 1100 to 1300 milligrams of sodium per 100 grams. Red miso can reach 3000 milligrams per 100 grams. A bowl uses a generous tablespoon or two of paste before anything else is added. The dashi stock base, made from kombu and dried bonito, contributes additional sodium before the miso paste is even incorporated. Miso soup does contain beneficial fermented compounds, B vitamins, and protein from tofu and wakame seaweed, so calling it nutritionally empty is an overstatement. But calling it light is a genuinely dangerous misdescription for something with this sodium profile sitting in a starter bowl. The Japanese public health community has run active campaigns to reduce miso soup consumption frequency specifically because of cardiovascular and hypertension concerns in the population. Restaurant miso soup frequently uses instant dashi powder, which pushes sodium levels even higher than home preparation. You've been calling the first lap of the race a warm-up while it was already counting against your total before the main event started. 10. You order green tea instead of soda because you are making a health-conscious decision. Green tea is ancient, Japanese, medicinal. You've seen the studies. You feel a small but genuine sense of superiority about the choice. Plain brewed green tea is essentially calorie-free and does have real documented benefits, but green tea as a consumer category now includes bottled green tea beverages, green tea lattes, green tea ice cream, green tea flavored chocolate, and green tea applied to nearly every processed food format imaginable, many of which are sugar delivery systems wearing green tea's credibility as a disguise while doing none of its work. A standard 500 milliliter bottle of commercially sold green tea frequently contains 15 to 25 grams of sugar, depending on brand. This is not meaningfully different from other sweetened beverages. Green tea lattes at popular coffee chains combine high sugar sweetened matcha powder with whole milk and added syrup, reaching 300 to 400 calories per serving. The antioxidant benefits most cited, catechins, EGCG, exist in meaningful concentrations in properly brewed loose-leaf green tea but degrade significantly in bottled products due to exposure to light, heat, and time. Japan has a robust confectionery industry built on green tea, flavoring that uses the flavor profile while delivering full sugar and fat content with complete sincerity. High concentration matcha supplements consumed in large quantities have been linked in case studies to liver stress. You've been using the word salad to feel better about a bowl that is mostly croutons with a single leaf resting on top. 11. You go to a hibachi restaurant. You watch the chef flip shrimp, construct an onion volcano, and cook your meal on a flat iron griddle the size of a small country while everyone at the table claps. You call it Japanese food. You tell people you had Japanese food. You are describing a cooking technique called teppanyaki, not hibachi, and the theatrical dinner show format you just experienced was calibrated specifically for American entertainment preferences by a restaurant chain founded in New York. A hibachi, in Japanese, is a fire bowl. A traditional small portable charcoal heating device historically used to warm rooms and hands. It is not a cooking surface. It is not a restaurant format. It is essentially a decorative brazier. Teppanyaki means iron plate cooking. That is the actual technique used in the restaurants Westerners universally call hibachi restaurants. The terminology was misapplied in American Japanese restaurant marketing decades ago, and the misnomer became so entrenched that correcting it now feels pedantic even though it's just the accurate word. The performative format, the onion volcano, the shrimp flip, the chef as entertainer show, was largely pioneered in the United States by the Benihana chain, founded in New York in 1964 by Hiroaki Aoki, a Japanese immigrant who built the experience specifically around what American diners found exciting and entertaining. This theatrical style is not a traditional dining format in Japan. In Japan, teppanyaki exists as upscale, quiet, skill-focused cooking. The entertainment component you experienced was an American commercial invention. You've been treating the theme park as the historical site because a person in a costume handed you information there. 12. Automatic soy sauce application is the culinary equivalent of salting your food before you've tasted it. Fish arrives. Hand moves towards soy sauce. This is the ritual, the reflex, the thing you do because everyone at every table has always done it. With certain fish, this reflex is actively counterproductive, and the chef made decisions before the plate reached you that your muscle memory is now overriding, with less information than was used to make them. At quality sushi and sashimi restaurants, particularly omakase establishments, fish is frequently pre-seasoned by the chef with specific salts, yuzu citrus, ponzu, or carefully selected brushed sauces. Additional soy sauce added on top of these compounds the flavors in ways that are unpredictable at best and destructive at worst. Delicate white fish, flounder, sea bream, snapper have subtle flavors that soy sauce dominates easily. The traditional Japanese approach for these fish often involves sudachi or yuzu juice and salt rather than soy sauce at all. The correct technique, when soy sauce is appropriate, is to dip only the fish portion lightly, not the rice and nigiri, not a prolonged soak, to avoid the salt overwhelming the fish's natural umami. Some fish are served with entirely different condiments: horse mackerel with ginger and spring onion, fatty tuna sometimes with only wasabi, certain shellfish with ponzu. The universal soy sauce reflex is partly a Western habituation. You've been putting your own sauce on every dish at every restaurant and calling it dining. What you've been describing this whole time is just eating alone with your own ideas. 13. You see Wagyu on a menu and think Kobe. You see Kobe style and assume you're getting the legendary Japanese beef. You pay accordingly and feel like a person who understands what they are eating. All Kobe beef is Wagyu. Almost no Wagyu is Kobe. And Kobe style is a phrase with no legal definition anywhere on earth. It is literally just a word, completely unprotected, placed on menus, specifically to extract money from people who've heard that Kobe beef is extraordinary. Wagyu means Japanese cow. It is a broad category term covering 4 specific breeds, the most common being Japanese black. Kobe beef is a protected brand designation referring exclusively to Tajima strain, a Japanese black cattle raised in Hyogo Prefecture, meeting strict grading criteria, a beef marbling score of 6 or above on a 12-point scale, and certified by the Kobe Beef Marketing and Distribution Promotion Association. Until 2012, it was literally impossible to eat genuine Kobe beef outside Japan. The country had an export ban on certified Kobe beef. Any Kobe beef appearing on an American menu before 2012 was, by definition, fraudulent. After the export ban lifted, certified Kobe beef reached only a tiny number of officially approved international restaurants. The probability that a random steakhouse's Kobe-style item involves certified Kobe cattle is functionally 0. American Wagyu and Australian Wagyu are crossbreeds, Japanese black crossed with Angus, producing legitimately good, well-marbled beef that is categorically different from Japanese certified Wagyu. You've been paying champagne prices for sparkling wine because the label said champagne style, and you never thought to ask the follow-up question. 14. The California roll is foundational Japanese sushi. It's on every sushi menu everywhere. It must be Japanese. Its name contains the word California, which you have somehow processed as decorative and irrelevant to the question of where it came from. The California roll was invented in North America in the late 1960s or early 1970s, either in Los Angeles or Vancouver. Food historians still actively debate the specific location, as a deliberate adaptation designed for Western palates that were uncomfortable with raw fish. The most frequently cited origin story attributes it to Ichiro Mashida, a sushi chef at the Tokyo Kaiken restaurant in Los Angeles, who substituted avocado for toro when toro was unavailable, then added crab and cucumber to suit local preferences. A competing claim from Vancouver attributes the roll to Hidekazu Tojo, who says he created an inside-out roll with the same fillings to hide the seaweed that many North American diners then found off-putting. The inside-out roll format itself, rice on the exterior, nori on the interior, is an American innovation. Traditional Japanese sushi keeps nori on the outside. Avocado is not a traditional Japanese ingredient and was virtually unknown in Japanese cuisine before this adaptation occurred. The California roll's success in North America is credited with making sushi broadly accessible to non-Japanese audiences and essentially driving the global sushi boom that followed. You've been citing the adaptation as the original text and confidently correcting people who actually read the source material. 15. You've seen the marketing. Japanese knives are the pinnacle of bladecraft, forged with thousand-year-old katana secrets, spiritual descendants of samurai steel. You pay 3 to 5 times what you'd pay for a European knife because of this story, and the story is doing a significant amount of load-bearing work that the metallurgy alone would not justify. Japanese kitchen knives are genuinely excellent, but they perform the way they do for specific engineering reasons that have nothing to do with samurai mythology, and the ancient secrets narrative is a marketing strategy, not a history lesson you should be repeating at dinner parties. The actual technical reason Japanese knives perform differently is that they use harder steel alloys, typically reaching 60 to 67 on the Rockwell hardness scale versus European knives at 56 to 58, which allows a thinner, more acute edge angle of 10 to 15 degrees per side compared to 20 to 25 degrees. This harder steel sharpens to a finer edge. It is also more brittle, meaning Japanese knives chip more easily if misused on bones or frozen food than their more flexible European counterparts. Japanese kitchen knife traditions, including famous production centers like Seikai and Seki, develop primarily in the Edo period and later. The steel compositions and production methods are modern industrial metallurgy, not ancient sword secrets passed through warrior bloodlines. Many high-quality Japanese knives sold globally are now factory-produced. European knife traditions have their own centuries-deep heritage. You bought an extremely well-engineered product and then believed the mythology on the packaging instead of simply reading the engineering specifications. 16. You see matcha, you see green tea. You understand these as the same basic product in different forms. A tea bag versus a powder, same plant, same story, just presented differently depending on the menu. Matcha and standard green tea share a plant species and nothing else that matters for how they taste, how they're made, or what they do to your body. They are produced through entirely different cultivation and processing methods that create dramatically different nutritional profiles, flavor intensities, and cultural functions. Matcha is produced from tencha, tea leaves grown under shade for 3 to 4 weeks before harvest. That shade forces the plant to produce elevated chlorophyll, which creates the intense green color, and elevated L-theanine, a calming amino acid, while simultaneously reducing the catechin bitterness that makes unshaded green tea sharp. After harvest, tencha leaves are steamed, dried, and stripped of stems and veins before being stone ground into an ultrafine powder. When you drink matcha, you consume the entire leaf, not an extraction. Standard green teas like sencha are produced without shade covering and brewed as leaf extractions. You consume dissolved compounds, not the leaf itself. Because matcha involves consuming the whole leaf, it contains significantly more caffeine and L-theanine per serving than steeped green tea. The L-theanine and caffeine combination produces a notably different cognitive state, alert and calm simultaneously, compared to coffee's caffeine alone. Ceremonial grade matcha is an entirely different product from culinary grade matcha used in baking. You've been treating the cover version and the original recording as identical because they share a title. 17. You order tempura and feel connected to centuries of Japanese culinary tradition. Light batter, perfect crunch, delicate vegetables, and seafood emerging from hot oil with the precision of something refined across generations. Tempura was introduced to Japan by Portuguese Jesuit missionaries in the 16th century. Japan made it extraordinary. Japan did not invent it. You've been crediting the student for the teacher's entire curriculum, and the teacher showed up with the recipe 450 years ago. The word tempura is widely believed to derive from either the Latin phrase referring to religious fasting periods, quatuor anni tempora, or from the Portuguese word tempero, meaning seasoning or cooking, brought to Japan by missionaries arriving in 1543. Portuguese Catholic missionaries observed fasting from meat on specific religious days and ate fried vegetables and fish in batter during these periods. Japanese cooks in Nagasaki and Edo observed this technique and adopted it. Japanese culinary tradition then refined and elevated the technique significantly, developing the ultralight, cold water batter designed to minimize gluten development, calibrating oil temperatures with precision, and systematizing which ingredients suit high heat frying. Prior to Portuguese contact, Japan had very limited deep frying culinary tradition. The introduction of this cooking method was genuinely transformative to Japanese cuisine. The cultural adoption was so complete and the refinement so substantial that tempura became deeply embedded in Japanese food identity over the centuries that followed. But original Japanese it is not, by any historical record that exists. You've been thanking the renovation contractor for building the house. 18. You find something labeled sushi-grade salmon at a grocery store. You buy it, slice it, eat it raw at home, and feel competent and culinarily advanced. Sushi grade means safe for raw consumption, the label says so. Except no government agency defines that term. No certification body issues it. No regulatory standard sits behind those words. The label means exactly what the store decides it means, which may be considerably less than what you're assuming when you make purchasing decisions based on it. The FDA has no legal definition for sushi grade or sashimi grade. Any fish retailer can apply these terms to any product without meeting specific standards beyond their own judgment and commercial interest. The FDA does have guidelines for raw fish, recommending that fish intended for raw consumption be frozen at -4 degrees Fahrenheit for 7 days or at -31 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 hours to kill parasites. Whether your sushi grade store salmon met these standards is genuinely unknown unless you ask and receive a documented answer. Farmed Atlantic salmon is one of the safer options for raw consumption because its controlled feed environment dramatically reduces parasite exposure. But this safety comes from farming conditions, not from the label. Wild-caught fish carry genuine parasitic risks, including Anisaki's worms, requiring proper freezing protocols to eliminate. Restaurant sushi operations in most jurisdictions are subject to health code requirements and inspector oversight for raw fish handling. Home handling receives no such oversight and introduces variables the label cannot account for. You've been trusting a sticker someone printed to tell you something the law never required them to prove. 19. Ramen is defined by its broth, the long-simmered, deeply complex liquid that requires 12, 24, or 48 hours of continuous cooking. This is the romance. This is what separates real ramen from everything else. Many of Japan's most revered and regionally distinct ramen styles involve broths that take 15 minutes to assemble, not days, and the multi-day broth is one specific style, tonkotsu, not the universal definition of what ramen craft requires. Tonkotsu ramen, the Kyushu style, does require an extended boil, specifically a hard rolling boil of pork bones for 12 to 18 or more hours to emulsify the collagen and fat into the characteristically cloudy, rich, creamy white broth that defines the style. Shoyu ramen, the Tokyo style, and shio ramen are built on clear, lighter broths, typically dashi-based using kombu and katsuobushi, cooked briefly, often within 30 to 60 minutes. These broths are frequently ready in under an hour. The most technically complex element in premium ramen is often the tare, the concentrated seasoning sauce made separately from the broth and added in precise quantities to each individual bowl. Abura soba and maizmen are brothless ramen styles where noodles are dressed directly with sauce. These are legitimate, popular, widely respected ramen categories. The multi-day broth narrative, while valid for tonkotsu, was applied universally to ramen by Western food media that encountered tonkotsu first and then generalized from that single data point. You've decided all jazz takes 4 hours because the first concert you attended happened to be a marathon improvisational set. 20. You remove the nori from your sushi because it tastes strange, or you tolerate it as structural material. The edible tape holding your roll together. It is packaging. It is functional. It is not the point of what you're eating. Nori is a nutritionally dense sea vegetable with a complex flavor profile that contributes critical umami to the overall taste of sushi, and treating it as packaging means you're missing approximately half of what was intentionally put on your plate. Nori, the red algae Pyropia yezoensis when dried and toasted is rich in protein accounting for up to 30% of its dry weight, iodine, vitamins B12, A, and C, and contains significant glutamate, a primary umami compound that shapes the savory depth of everything it touches. Quality nori has distinct flavor grades. Premium toasted nori has a complex savory sweet oceanic flavor. Low-quality nori tastes primarily of bitterness and salt. The sheets are not interchangeable products. In Japanese cuisine, nori is consumed independently as a snack called yaki nori, used in furikake rice seasoning blends wrapped around rice balls called onigiri, and used as a condiment in its own right. It has a complete culinary identity that exists entirely outside its role as a sushi wrapper. The structural role of nori in sushi rolls requires its moisture content to be carefully managed. Nori exposed to humidity softens quickly, which is why proper hand rolls called temetki are consumed immediately after assembly. You've been tearing the covers off books for years, calling them decoration, and then reading the pages and wondering why some books feel structurally incomplete. 21. The restaurant has Japanese writing on the sign. The menu references Japan. You're eating authentic Japanese cuisine and forming opinions about Japanese food based on this experience. The vast majority of Japanese restaurants outside Japan serve menus that have been substantially adapted for local taste preferences, available ingredients, and economic realities. What you're eating is a localized interpretation with real merit as its own thing. But it is not a document of Japanese culinary practice. Rice used outside Japan is rarely the Japanese short-grain japonica varieties prepared correctly. True Japanese rice is stickier, sweeter, and has a specific texture that's difficult to source and expensive globally. Most international sushi rice is a compromised product. Fish availability differs dramatically by geography. Fresh fish in a landlocked city has traveled a fundamentally different supply chain than fish at a coastal Japanese fish market, affecting flavor, texture, and species selection in ways that can't be corrected after the fact. Portion sizes at Japanese restaurants in Western markets are routinely larger than Japanese counterparts because restaurant economics demand volume and local expectations have reshaped menus accordingly. Many items common on international Japanese menus barely exist in Japan. The extensive California infusion roll menu, the teppanyaki theater format, and the American-style teriyaki sauce-drenched chicken are primarily diaspora or export products built for different audiences. Surveys of Japanese tourists dining abroad frequently note surprise at how different international Japanese food tastes from the food they eat at home. You've been forming opinions about a country's literature from the translated, abridged editions sold at airport bookstores. 22. Japan sushi. These are your 2 data points, and they produce one image. Japanese people eating sushi constantly. It is the national food. It is everywhere. It is what they eat. Sushi is a special occasion or restaurant food for the majority of Japanese people and not a daily staple. It was a luxury item for most of its modern history and retains premium pricing at quality establishments because it is still, fundamentally, a premium product. Japanese government dietary surveys consistently show rice, miso soup, pickled vegetables, cooked fish, and various prepared side dishes as the actual daily dietary staples, not raw fish placed on vinegared rice by a trained specialist. Quality sushi restaurants in Japan are expensive by any standard. An omakase sushi meal at a respected Tokyo establishment costs anywhere from $100 to over $500 per person. Kaiten sushi, the conveyor belt format, and chain restaurants like Sushiro and Kura Sushi make affordable sushi widely accessible. But these are casual dining experiences representing a categorically different product from traditional edome sushi. Japan's most consumed fish-related dishes involve cooked fish, grilled mackerel called sabashiyaki, simmered fish called nitsuke, and fish as a protein component in teishoku. Set meals are far more common daily encounters with seafood than raw fish on rice. The image of sushi as Japan's default daily food is partly a product of global Japanese restaurant culture, which defaulted to sushi as the most internationally recognizable and marketable product it could export. You've been assuming everyone in Italy eats pizza for every meal because that's what every Italian restaurant near you sells. 23. You've heard umami. You understand it as savory, or maybe as a fancier word for salty, or perhaps as marketing language for food writers who needed a fifth taste to fill column inches. It's basically just what meaty or salty things taste like, you think. Umami is a physiologically distinct taste sensation with dedicated taste receptors, a unique biochemical mechanism, and culinary effects that cannot be replicated by saltiness, sweetness, sourness, or bitterness, or any combination of the four. It is not a synonym for any of them, and it cannot be substituted with them. Umami was identified and named in 1908 by Professor Kikunai Ikeda of Tokyo Imperial University, who isolated glutamate from kombu seaweed as the specific compound responsible for the distinctive savory quality in dashi broth. The taste is triggered by L-glutamate, inosinate, and guanylate binding to specific taste receptors. Biologically distinct from the mechanisms behind salt detection, sweetness, or bitterness. Umami also produces a long-lasting mouth-coating sensation called kokumi that lingers and amplifies surrounding flavors. Salt heightens intensity. Umami adds depth and rounds the entire palate experience. The umami effect is also synergistic. Glutamate from kombu combined with inosinate from dried bonito produces an umami effect up to 8 times stronger than either compound generates alone. This synergy is the scientific basis behind Japanese dashi stock's extraordinary flavor efficiency with minimal ingredients. Western food science resisted the fifth taste classification until receptor research confirmed its distinct biology in the 1980s and beyond. You've been calling blue a dark kind of light color because you only had 4 crayons and couldn't accept that the box needed expanding. 24. Instant ramen is poverty food. It is junk food. It is late-night desperation food composed entirely of sodium and chemistry masquerading as a meal with no nutritional value whatsoever, eaten in shame by people who ran out of better options. Instant ramen is genuinely not a nutritionally complete meal. It is high in sodium, refined carbohydrates, and saturated fat. But the no nutritional value declaration is technically false, and the cultural story of its invention is one of the most consequential food events of the 20th century, which the shame narrative conveniently skips over entirely. Momofuku Ando invented instant ramen in 1958 after witnessing severe food scarcity in post-war Japan. His stated goal was to create an affordable, easily prepared food to prevent starvation. It was explicitly a humanitarian project before it became a commercial one. Instant ramen noodles contain protein from wheat-derived gluten, carbohydrates, and are frequently fortified with B vitamins and iron in many national markets. The primary nutritional concerns are sodium, A single packet often contains 1,500 to 1,800 milligrams, roughly 75 to 90% of the recommended daily intake, refined carbohydrates, and fat from the flash frying process used to preserve the noodles. How you prepare and supplement instant ramen dramatically changes its nutritional outcome. Adding an egg, vegetables, and using less of the seasoning packet creates a meaningfully different product. In food security research, instant ramen is studied for how it provides caloric sufficiency during economic hardship. It has saved lives in genuine scarcity. You've been dismissing the tool entirely because it isn't right for every job, while ignoring the specific jobs it does better than anything else. 25. Japan is surrounded by ocean. The fish must be extraordinarily fresh. The entire island is essentially a continuous fishing operation delivering freshness to your plate automatically. Geography equals quality. It's a passive process, you assume, requiring no effort beyond proximity to water. Japan's extraordinary fish quality is the result of sophisticated cold chain logistics, cultural investment in quality infrastructure, and specific market systems built over centuries. The ocean proximity is necessary but not sufficient. Without everything built on top of it, the ocean alone produces nothing exceptional. Japan's Tsukiji and now Toyosu market systems involve highly specialized graders, transportation protocols, and quality assessment processes representing massive institutional investment, not a natural consequence of having a coastline. Fish quality degrades rapidly within hours of death, without precise temperature management. Japan's cold chain infrastructure, from boat to market to restaurant, is considered among the most sophisticated globally because considerable engineering has gone into making it function at that level. Much of the fish consumed in Japan is also imported. Shrimp from Southeast Asia, salmon from Norway and Chile, tuna from global fishing grounds. Fresh from Japan's waters describes only a portion of what's eaten in Japan. Japan pioneered ultra-low temperature freezing for tuna quality preservation. Tuna caught globally are frozen at negative 60 degrees Celsius on the boat, transported frozen, then thawed by specialists at the market. The resulting product is considered superior in quality to unfrozen fish that spent days in transit. Poor quality fish restaurants exist in Japan as they do everywhere. You've been crediting the vineyard's geography for the wine quality while ignoring the winemaker's 40 years of technical knowledge. 26. Japanese sauce is a single flavor in your mind. Dark, sweet, savory, slightly caramelized on grilled things. Soy sauce, teriyaki, same thing with different labels. You use them interchangeably in stir fries. Shoyu is a single fermented ingredient. Teriyaki is a cooking technique that produces a glaze. They are not interchangeable products. One is an ingredient, one is a method. The American bottled product, called teriyaki sauce, is a further departure that traditional Japanese cooking barely recognizes as the same category of thing. Teriyaki in Japanese refers to a cooking method, teri meaning luster or glaze, yaki meaning grilled or broiled. The technique involves basting protein, typically fish or chicken, with a reduction of soy sauce, sake, and mirin while cooking, creating a lacquered surface through controlled caramelization. In traditional Japanese teriyaki, the glaze is made fresh during cooking, calibrated to the specific protein being prepared. It is a culinary skill, not a bottled product purchased from a shelf and poured over things. The bottled teriyaki sauce, common in Western markets, is an American commercial invention, a thick, sugary, ginger and garlic forward condiment that has limited cultural equivalence in Japan's actual culinary practice. Soy sauce is the foundational ingredient in teriyaki, but it is also the foundational ingredient in tonkatsu sauce, yakitori tare, sukiyaki broth, ramen tare, and dozens of other distinct preparations. Mirin, the sweet rice wine, is what creates the caramelization and shine that defines the glaze. Without mirin, you have soy marinated meat. You've been calling the flour and the finished cake the same thing because one ingredient is inside the other. 27. Japanese whiskey is excellent. It wins global awards. It tastes like Scotch because it was inspired by Scotch and Japanese distillers trained in Scotland. It is essentially a Pacific Rim branch of the Scottish product. Similar premise, different postal code. Japanese whiskey has evolved into a distinct style category with production philosophies, flavor profiles, and blending traditions that differ meaningfully from Scotch. And the category currently has a labeling problem so serious that much of what's sold as Japanese whiskey contains no Japanese whiskey at all. Masataka Taketsuru, who founded Nikka Whiskey, did train in Scotland in the 1910s and brought back Scottish production methods. Japanese distilleries then adapted those methods to Japanese climate, water sources, and local wood varieties, especially Mizunara oak, creating distinct flavor development over decades. Mizunara casks impart flavors, sandalwood, incense, coconut, layered spice, that have no Scottish equivalent. Until 2021, there were no legal definitions governing what could be labeled Japanese whiskey. The term had no protected geographic or production requirements, allowing producers to import Scotch, Canadian, or other whiskey, relabel it, and sell it as Japanese. The Japan Spirits and Liqueurs Makers Association established voluntary standards in 2021 requiring Japanese whiskey to be made from Japanese water and malted grain, fermented, distilled, and aged for at least 3 years in Japan. These are voluntary, not law. The global premium on Japanese whiskey made exploiting the labeling gap extremely profitable. You've been buying a designer product from people who were never required to prove they made it. 28. Authentic Japanese food is pure. It uses Japanese ingredients. Western contamination, butter, cheese, cream, bread, is inauthentic. If a Western ingredient appears, the dish has left the category of real Japanese food and entered something else. Japanese cuisine has continuously incorporated foreign ingredients and techniques throughout its entire history and produced some of its most beloved, most distinctly Japanese dishes through exactly that process. Purity is a mythology, not a history lesson. Yoshoku, literally Western food, is a fully recognized category of Japanese cuisine encompassing Hamburg steak called hambagu, cream croquettes called kurimu korokke, beef stew, and hayashi rice. These dishes use butter, cream, breadcrumbs, and tomato, and they are deeply Japanese in their adapted form, eaten in Japanese homes as comfort food for generations. Curry, kare raizu, is one of Japan's most consumed home-cooked meals. It arrived via the British Royal Navy in the Meiji era, was adapted through Japanese curry roux blocks, and became a cornerstone of everyday Japanese eating. It contains no traditionally Japanese ingredients, and nobody considers it foreign anymore. Japan's shokupan milk bread uses Western bread techniques refined to produce a uniquely soft, pillowy loaf that Japanese bakers now teach internationally. Portuguese missionaries introduced not just tempura but castella sponge cake, now a regional Nagasaki specialty sold as traditional heritage. Melon pan, cream bread, and an pan are Western bread formats adapted with Japanese sensibilities and are now entirely Japanese cultural products. You've been demanding the river stay where it started when half the landscape it shaped is downstream. 29. You know there are chopstick rules. Don't stab food, don't cross them. These feel like arbitrary formality. Etiquette for etiquette's sake. Old rules that stopped meaning anything the moment their original context disappeared. Specific chopstick taboos in Japanese culture carry direct associations with death rituals and funeral ceremonies. They are not arbitrary. Violating them is not a minor breach of table manners. It is a vivid and immediate reference to mourning practices that most Japanese people recognize instantly. Sticking chopsticks vertically upright in a bowl of rice, called tatebashi, directly mimics the practice of offering incense sticks and rice to the deceased at a Buddhist altar or funeral service. Doing this at dinner is equivalent to incorporating a burial rite into a meal, without warning, in front of people who did not agree to attend a funeral. Passing food chopstick to chopstick, called hashi watashi, replicates the specific practice performed at cremation ceremonies where family members use chopsticks to pass cremated remains into the funeral urn. This single action at a dinner table is viscerally disturbing to many Japanese people in a way that goes significantly beyond discomfort about table manners. Using chopsticks to point at people is rude across East Asian cultures generally. Spearing food with chopsticks suggests inability to use them properly. Waving chopsticks over shared dishes while deciding what to eat, called mayoi bashi, is considered both greedy and disrespectful to communal dining norms. You thought you were just forgetting which fork to use. You were performing funeral rites at dinner and wondering why the room felt strange. 30. Those small, colorful, pickled things at the edge of your Japanese set meal are garnish, decoration, the parsley equivalent of the Japanese plate, present for visual reasons, eaten only by people with nothing left on their plate. Tsukemono are a functional culinary component with significant nutritional roles, palate cleansing functions, and a documented history of thousands of years in Japanese cuisine. They are on the plate for precise reasons, and every single one of those reasons has nothing to do with decoration. Tsukemono function as palate cleansers between dishes. Their acidity and distinct flavor profile reset taste perception between courses, allowing each subsequent flavor to be experienced fully without the previous dish's lingering quality obscuring it. This is a culinary engineering decision made intentionally. Traditional tsukemono production methods involve lacto-fermentation, salt curing, brine fermentation, or rice. Bran fermentation in the case of nukazuki. Producing live cultures whose beneficial bacterial content was intuited centuries before microbiology existed to formalize the concept. The variety is vast and precisely calibrated. Umeboshi is a fermented salt plum extremely high in citric acid, traditionally used as a digestive aid and antimicrobial food preservative. Gari is young ginger pickled in vinegar and served with sushi, specifically to cleanse the palate between different fish. Its placement in the meal is structural, not ornamental. Tsukemono occupy a designated position in the traditional Japanese Ichiju Sansai meal structure, 1 soup, 3 sides, where they are structurally required, not optionally decorative. You've been moving the punctuation off the page and then wondering why the sentences don't fully make sense. 31. Tofu is the food world's apology for not having anything better available. It is beige. It is soft. It tastes like the culinary equivalent of silence. You eat it because someone told you it's healthy, not because it has merit as a food experience in its own right. Tofu has significant inherent flavor in its higher quality forms, and the tofu is flavorless reputation was built entirely on poorly sourced, improperly handled tofu that has been sitting in water in a plastic tub for too long in markets that treat it as an afterthought rather than a perishable product requiring care. Fresh artisan tofu, made from high-quality soybeans and consumed within hours of production, has a delicate, slightly sweet, faintly nutty flavor that bears almost no resemblance to the watery, faintly sour products sold in most Western supermarkets. Tofu variety is also vast and dramatically different in texture and culinary function. Silken kinugoshi is custard soft. Firm momen has a pressed dense texture. Grilled yakidofu has a firmer skin. And freeze-dried koya-dofu is spongy with concentrated flavor. Udofu, hot tofu simmered in kombu broth, is a dedicated cuisine built around celebrating the pure flavor of fresh tofu with minimal intervention. An entire Kyoto restaurants exist solely to serve it. An entire restaurant category built around celebrating an ingredient's unadulterated flavor is a fairly strong argument against the premise that the ingredient has no flavor. Soybeans used for premium tofu are sourced by variety and region with care comparable to wine terroir. You tried the thing once at its worst possible version and filed a permanent verdict on the entire category. 32. Raw fish consumption requires expensive restaurant sushi grade sourcing. The supermarket fish is for cooking. Cooking kills the danger. The danger is only removed by paying restaurant prices. This is the framework you've been operating under, and the determining factor for raw fish safety is neither the retail environment nor the price point. It's the cold chain history and parasite treatment of the specific fish in question. Farmed Atlantic salmon, sold in many supermarkets, is considered relatively low risk for raw consumption due to controlled farming conditions that dramatically reduce parasite exposure. Some supermarket farmed salmon is arguably safer for raw consumption than certain premium wild-caught fish with less documented treatment history. The FDA's recommended parasite kill protocol, freezing at -4 degrees Fahrenheit for 7 days, is achievable and verifiable, and some supermarkets do freeze fish accordingly. The question is whether you can verify this for any specific product, which requires asking your fishmonger directly and receiving an actual documented answer. In Japan, fish sold at supermarkets is labeled with sashimi-grade designations backed by actual regulatory requirements. Japan's food labeling laws require the designation to meet specific standards, unlike the unregulated use of the same term in most other markets. The practice of ikejime, a Japanese fish-killing method involving precise brain spiking followed by spinal cord destruction and immediate icing, produces higher quality flesh by preventing lactic acid buildup. This is about technique and care, practiced by specialists at fish markets. You've been using the store name as a substitute for asking about the actual quality control process that determines what you're eating. 33. Sake is a hot drink. You order it warm at restaurants. You heat it at home. The warmth feels ceremonial and traditionally correct. Cold sake seems somehow unfinished or disrespectful to the drink's heritage. Premium sake is almost universally better served chilled. Warming sake was historically a practical solution for lower quality sake, masking off flavors with heat. Applying this logic to premium sake actively destroys the delicate aromas and flavor compounds the brewer spent months carefully developing through precise fermentation management. Sake has a sophisticated temperature vocabulary in Japanese. Tobikiri-ken at around 60 degrees Celsius is extremely hot. Atsu-ken at 50 degrees is hot. Nuru-ken at 40 degrees is lukewarm. Hiyaroshi is room temperature. Hanahi at 15 degrees is lightly chilled. Yukihi at 5 degrees is well chilled. Each temperature produces genuinely different flavor expression from the same liquid. Futsushu, which is table sake, and some junmai varieties can benefit from warming. Heat amplifies their umami and rice character while softening roughness. Premium Jinjo and Daijinjo sake, produced with highly polished rice at low fermentation temperatures to develop delicate fruity and floral aromatics, should emphatically not be heated. Their defining characteristics are volatile aromatic compounds that evaporate when warmed, leaving behind a hollow, flattened version of what was there before. The warming tradition is centuries old and was practically useful when sake was often lower quality. Many premium sake breweries explicitly label bottles with recommended serving temperature ranges. You've been microwaving the premium ice cream because someone once told you dessert is better warm, then wondering why it tastes like expensive milk. 34. Gyoza is Japanese. It is on every Japanese restaurant menu. It is a Japanese dumpling eaten at Japanese restaurants as Japanese food. Gyoza is a direct Japanese adaptation of Chinese jiaozi dumplings. The connection is direct, acknowledged by food historians, and the word gyoza is simply the Japanese phonetic pronunciation of the exact same Chinese characters, jiaozi, that spell jiaozi. Japan made this dish exceptional. Japan did not create it. Jiaozi has a documented history in China dating back over 1800 years. Japanese gyoza derives directly from jiaozi, sharing not just origin, but identical written characters pronounced differently across the language boundary. Japanese gyoza spread primarily through contact with Chinese cuisine during the early 20th century, and proliferated throughout Japan after World War II, when Japanese soldiers and civilians returning from Manchuria brought familiarity with the dish home and adapted it for local ingredients and tastes. Japanese gyoza has since developed genuinely distinct characteristics from its Chinese origin. The filling typically uses more garlic, the wrappers are thinner, and the dominant preparation method is yaki gyoza, pan-fried with a crispy bottom, then steam-finished in the same pan. Chinese jiaozi are more often boiled. Utsunomiya City and Hamamatsu City in Japan have an ongoing regional rivalry over which is Japan's gyoza capital. An entire cultural competition exists, which demonstrates deep Japanese ownership of the dish despite its foreign origin. The pattern repeats constantly in Japanese culinary history. You've been refusing to acknowledge the instrument's origin because the musician has played it better than anyone else for 100 years. 35. Japanese Kit Kats are a global phenomenon. Bizarre, adventurous, uniquely Japanese creativity unleashed on a Western candy bar canvas. Matcha flavors, wasabi flavors, sake flavors, regional varieties in limited packaging. This is Japan being wonderfully strange and inventive with food in ways that only Japan manages. The Japanese Kit Kat phenomenon is a calculated commercial strategy by Nestlé Japan, built partly on a linguistic coincidence and executed through precision regional marketing targeting. The creativity is real, the spontaneity is not. Kit Kat sounds remarkably similar to kitokatsu in Japanese, a phrase meaning surely win or certain to succeed. This phonetic accident made Kit Kats a popular good luck gift for students before examinations, creating a gifting market that exists nowhere else globally and that Nestlé Japan did not invent, but did identify and aggressively capitalize on. Nestlé Japan then produced regional limited edition flavors tied to Japanese regional identity. Matcha from Kyoto, sweet potato from the Tokyo area, regional strawberry varieties, turning the product into a souvenir category purchased by tourists and locals seeking regional identity in candy form. At its peak, Japan produced over 300 distinct Kit Kat flavors. This is a marketing strategy executed at extraordinary scale by a skilled product development team, not spontaneous creative eccentricity emerging from Japanese culture. Nestlé Japan also opened a high-end Kit Kat chocolatory patisserie staffed by pastry chefs, generating media coverage by elevating the candy into a luxury product tier. Many flavors are intentional limited releases designed to create scarcity and collectability. You've been marveling at the art installation without reading the placard confirming it was a commissioned campaign. 36 Japan Wagyu. These connect automatically in your mind. Japanese beef is premium beef. All beef from Japan is the legendary marbled product people pay extraordinary prices for. Japan produces enormous quantities of standard grade beef and imports a significant amount of foreign beef to supply domestic demand. Wagyu at the premium marbled end represents a specific small portion of overall beef consumption. Most beef eaten in Japan daily is not extraordinary by global standards and was never intended to be. Japan is a significant importer of beef, primarily from Australia and the United States. This imported beef supplies a large portion of the domestic market, particularly for gyudon beef bowl chains, supermarkets, and everyday restaurant use. Japanese beef grading runs from grade 1 to grade 5, with further marble scoring on a 12-point scale within grade 5. The intensely marbled product you see photographed online represents scoring of 8 to 12 on that scale. The majority of domestically consumed Japanese beef falls at significantly lower grades. Wagyu cattle represent approximately 90% of Japanese domestically raised beef cattle by number, but within that population, price and quality vary enormously. Entry-level Wagyu and certified Kobe or Matsusaka beef are categorically different products at different price points, serving different markets. Gyudon, The affordable beef bowl sold at chain restaurants like Yoshinoya, Sukiya, and Matsuya is one of Japan's most frequently consumed beef dishes and uses thinly sliced, affordable beef in a sweet soy sauce. It is excellent, widely eaten, and has nothing to do with premium Wagyu. You've been assuming every car from Germany is a sports vehicle because the country has a famous racing heritage. 37, the rice in sushi is rice. You cook rice, you put fish on it. The rice is a delivery vehicle for the fish, which is the important part. The rice is structural, necessary, but not itself a subject of interest or a matter of craft, requiring years to master. Sushi rice, called shari, is a precision product requiring specific rice variety, specific water ratios, specific cooking protocols, specific vinegar seasoning application, and specific handling temperature. In traditional edamame sushi philosophy, the rice is considered at minimum equally important to the fish, and the argument has been made by serious practitioners that the rice is the harder technical achievement. Only short-grain Japanese japonica rice varieties produce the correct starch profile for sushi. The amylopectin content creates sticky, slightly glossy texture that holds form when shaped while releasing appropriately in the mouth. Long-grain rice categorically fails at this, producing neither the right texture nor the right behavior. Sushi vinegar, called awasezu, is a precisely proportioned blend of rice, vinegar, sugar, and salt that is folded into hot rice, using a cutting motion rather than stirring, which would break the grains, while simultaneously fanning the rice to cool it and evaporate excess moisture, creating surface shine. Sushi rice must be used at body temperature, approximately 37 degrees Celsius. Cold sushi rice is a serious quality failure. Starch crystallizes when refrigerated, destroying the intended texture entirely. Jiro Ono, among the most respected sushi masters in Japan, has stated explicitly that his rice receives as much consideration as his fish. Apprentices at his restaurant spend their first years mastering rice before they touch fish. You've been reading chapter headings and deciding that's the content. 38. Mochi is that chewy rice dessert, the little sweet balls, the ice cream wrapper, the pink and white confection at the end of a Japanese meal. It is Japanese candy, a sweet, and it lives comfortably in the dessert category alongside other treats. Mochi is a foundational Japanese cultural food with ceremonial significance, extensive savory applications, a multi-thousand-year history, and a documented annual death toll that no other dessert in the world generates, which should tell you something about its intensity as a food product. Mochi is made from mochi gome, a glutinous short grain rice, pounded into an extremely dense, elastic, aggressively sticky mass, either by traditional wooden mallet in a process called mochitsuki or by machine. Its texture is categorically different from ordinary rice preparations and has no real Western equivalent. Mochi carries enormous ceremonial importance. Kagami mochi, stacked mochi rounds, are displayed as New Year decorations and offered at household shrines. Eating mochi is the traditional New Year food practice. Consuming it in ozoni, a mochi and dashi broth, is a ritual marking the beginning of the Japanese year. Savory mochi applications are numerous and culturally central. Ozoni soup, zenzai with sweet adzuki bean, isobayaki grilled mochi wrapped in nori, chikara udon with mochi added to the bowl. Mochi kills people every year in Japan through choking. Its density makes it exceptionally dangerous for elderly people. The Japanese government issues public safety warnings before New Year, and emergency room admissions spike around January 1st annually without fail. The Western mochi ice cream product has little traditional basis. You've been referencing the adaptation until you forgot the source has an entirely different genre, purpose, and body count. 39. Edamame is Japanese. It arrives at Japanese restaurants before your meal. It's a Japanese snack eaten in Japan before sushi. It belongs to Japan the way ramen belongs to Japan. Edamame is a soybean, and soybeans originated in China, where both the beans and the practice of eating them young and green in the pod are documented centuries before Japanese cultivation of the practice began. Japan refined and popularized edamame's preparation and serving conventions. Japan did not originate the ingredient, the concept, or the practice. Soybeans, glycine max, were domesticated in northeastern China approximately 7,000 to 9,000 years ago. Chinese texts describe eating young green soybeans, called maodu in Chinese, as early as the 11th century AD. Soybeans arrived in Japan via China and Korea. Records of soybean cultivation in Japan appear in the Nara period of the 8th century AD. Well after Chinese cultivation and consumption of the same beans in the same young form was already established practice. Japanese culinary culture did develop edamame's preparation, seasoning, and serving conventions in distinct ways, boiling in salted water to specific textures, serving in pods for hands-on eating, and the specific cultural context of consuming edamame with cold beer in summer are distinctly Japanese practices with genuine cultural identity behind them. The word edamame, meaning branch beans, refers to the traditional Japanese practice of selling the beans still attached to the branch at harvest. It is a Japanese presentation convention, it is not an origin claim. You've been crediting the distributor for inventing the product because that's where you first encountered it on a menu. 40. Convenience store food is the bottom of the food quality ladder worldwide. A Japanese convenience store is still a convenience store. The rice balls are probably acceptable for emergencies, but no reasonable person with options would choose to eat there. Japanese convenience stores, primarily 7-Eleven, Japan, Lawson, and Family Mart, operate food programs that routinely outperform what passes for restaurant quality in other countries and are considered by both food professionals and ordinary Japanese people as a genuine aspect of Japanese food culture, not an embarrassing compromise. Japanese onigiri are produced to specific quality standards. Rice selection, filling quality, and nori freshness are all managed, and the nori is packaged separately from the rice in a dual wrapper system specifically engineered to prevent the nori from softening before consumption. This is product engineering applied to a rice ball. Japanese konbini hot food counters, oden, the slow-simmered dishes in dashi broth, steamed nikumen buns, fried chicken, are prepared daily and replenished regularly, with recipes developed by skilled food teams. 7-Eleven Japan specifically employs professional food product developers and collaborates with restaurant chefs to develop proprietary recipes. The product development budget and rigor is comparable to mid-level restaurant chains. International food writers and chefs have repeatedly cited Japanese konbini food as a serious cultural experience, not as a curiosity or a survival situation, but as genuinely excellent food that happens to be available at a convenience store. Japan's domestic convenience store market is extraordinarily competitive. 3 major chains across more than 55,000 locations nationwide have driven continuous quality improvement. You judge the library by the fact that it's open 24 hours and sells chips at the front counter and never read anything inside. 41. Wasabi paste is green. You know what wasabi looks like. You've seen it on every plate. The vivid bright green paste is the universal image. Real wasabi paste is a muted, grayish, pale sage green, not the vivid neon color of the paste in most restaurants. The bright green is the horseradish and dye fake version, colored specifically to match what consumers have been trained to expect from the counterfeit product they've been served so reliably and for so long that the counterfeit has become the visual standard. The Wasabia japonica rhizome, the part graded for wasabi, is a soft, muted sage green inside, significantly less vivid than artificial food dye produces. Fresh graded real wasabi is understated, gentle in color, not neon. The widespread fake paste is colored to a specific vivid green, largely because that is what customers associate with wasabi. The real product doesn't match the expectation the fake product created over decades of substitution. The leaves, stems, and petioles of the wasabi plant are also entirely edible. Wasabi leaves are used in pickling, salads, and various preparations in Japan, but are essentially unknown outside it. The color shift in real wasabi as it ages is a functional freshness indicator, freshly grated. Real wasabi has a brighter color that fades toward gray as volatile compounds degrade within that 15-minute window. Japan's domestic wasabi production is geographically limited. Shizuoka and Nagano prefectures are primary regions, with farming conditions so specific that production cannot be easily scaled even within Japan. You have been taught to recognize the authentic item by the features of the counterfeit version, and now the real thing looks wrong to you. 42. Raw eggs in Japan make you recoil. Tamago gohan, raw egg over rice, or sukiyaki with a raw egg. Dipping sauce appears on a menu and your mind goes immediately to salmonella. Japan is being reckless. This is a food safety failure dressed up as culinary tradition. Japanese eggs intended for raw consumption are produced under food safety standards dramatically more stringent than standard Western egg production. The product is fundamentally different. The risk tolerance hasn't changed. The starting conditions have. Japanese table eggs for raw consumption are subject to industry standards, requiring unbroken refrigeration from the moment of laying, rigorous washing, sanitization, and quality checks. Maintaining a cold chain in a way that most Western egg supply chains do not consistently match from farm to consumer. Japan maintains laying flocks under strict salmonella vaccination programs. The national approach to flock management significantly reduces the baseline rate of salmonella contamination compared to countries without equivalent programs in place. Eggs in Japan are labeled with a best before date, specifically for raw consumption, distinct from a general expiry date, reflecting the industry understanding that eggs consumed raw have different freshness requirements than eggs consumed cooked, and that these are meaningfully different products requiring different handling. The Japanese Food Safety Commission tracks egg-related illness rates, and Japan has extremely low incidences of salmonella from eggs despite extraordinarily high rates of raw egg consumption throughout the population. Taking a Japanese raw egg intended for raw consumption and assuming it carries the same risk profile as a Western grocery store egg is a category error. You applied the safety manual for one vehicle to an entirely different vehicle and concluded the other one was being driven dangerously. 43. Ramen noodles are noodles. Wheat noodles. The important part of ramen is the broth and the toppings. The noodles are a base, a vehicle, structurally necessary, but not themselves interesting, not variable in any way that matters. Ramen noodles are alkaline noodles with a specific chemical modification that produces their characteristic texture, color, and behavior in hot broth. And the noodle's precise characteristics are considered as central to regional ramen identity as the broth itself by anyone who takes the subject seriously. Ramen noodles are made with kansui, an alkaline solution, traditionally potassium carbonate and sodium carbonate, historically derived from specific alkaline mineral water sources that changes the pH of the wheat dough. This produces the characteristic yellow color through a reaction with wheat flavonoids and a springy, chewy texture that resists becoming soggy in hot broth. The kansui content, noodle thickness, noodle shape, and hydration level are variables that determine how the noodle holds up in a specific broth. Thin, straight noodles suit lighter broths. Thick, wavy noodles hold and carry heavier broths. Regional ramen styles specify noodle types. Hakata tonkotsu uses very thin, firm, straight noodles. Sapporo miso uses wavy, medium-thick noodles. Tokyo shoyu uses medium, slightly wavy noodles. These are not interchangeable. Many serious ramen restaurants make noodles in-house daily, treating noodle craft as a distinct skill set within ramen production. The practice of specifying noodle firmness when ordering at Hakata-style restaurants reflects customer understanding that noodle texture is a primary quality variable, not an afterthought. You've been evaluating the symphony while considering the instruments merely structural. Every musician in the room disagrees. 44. Japan is an island nation, and Japanese food has always been fish-focused. The ocean defines the diet, This is ancient, unchanging. The core truth of Japanese culinary identity stretching back to the beginning of recorded Japanese history. For over 1200 years, Japan's dominant food culture was Buddhist and Shinto influenced, prohibiting or severely restricting meat consumption, including fish during certain periods for certain groups. The current fish-forward image reflects a specific cultural phase, not an eternal dietary constant that has always been true. In 675 AD, Emperor Tenmu issued an edict banning the consumption of cattle, horses, dogs, monkeys, and chickens between April and September. The beginning of roughly 1200 years of official policy restricting meat eating based on Buddhist principles. Subsequent edicts and Buddhist institutional influence expanded restrictions further. Some periods saw fish consumption also restricted, particularly among the aristocracy and Buddhist clergy, who ate predominantly vegetarian diets in a tradition called Shojin Ryori. The current beef and meat culture in Japan dates primarily from the Meiji Restoration beginning in 1868. Emperor Meiji publicly ate beef in 1872 as a symbolic break from Buddhist dietary prohibitions. Japan's meat-eating culture is approximately 150 years old. Even fish consumption was geographically limited in historical Japan. Inland populations relied on preserved fish, and mountainous regions subsisted primarily on vegetables, game, and grains. Shojin Ryori, the Buddhist vegetarian cuisine developed in Japanese monasteries over centuries, produced tofu, yuba, fu, and elaborate vegetable preparations that remain foundational to Japanese cooking today. You've been reading the final chapter and explaining the entire book's argument from it, while the majority of the story was building something quite different before that last chapter arrived. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.